How's it going? Hope you're doing well. We got another video for you today. We are going to be looking at this set, Pokemon XY Breakthrough. So if you don't already know, Breakthrough was a set that came out in 2015. We have Scarlet and Violet era, right? Sword and Shield. Before that, we had the Sun and Moon era, and before that, we had the sets called X and Y. So from Evolution, Steam Siege, and today we're going to be looking at the set Breakthrough. I just did a video on Ancient Origins, but we're looking at the set Breakthrough today. And you're not going to want to miss this video because a lot of these cards are actually up significantly since January. As you can see, this Mega Mewtwo EX full art card, which is one of the best chase cards. It is actually the number one chase card in the set. You can see that it jumped from $45 in January for the single, and now it's selling in the 80s for this card. And likewise, the PSA 10s have also jumped up since January. You can see that this card was selling for $395 on January 13th. And now we have confirmed sales in the 500s in March, in the 800s, and even in the thousands throughout March and April, with the last sale being on April 26th right here. And what's great about PokeData.io is that it even tells you if it was a bid. And so we had 20 bids for this PSA 10 and it sold for $891. And that was recently on April 26th. So we're going to be looking at all the chase cards in this set and just see how big of a jump have these gains have been. And not only that, you guys, but we also like to look at the data, all-time data. Sometimes people are like, well, the card is up for the year, but you also want to look at the all-time data because that'll give you a good lens at what price point was this card undervalued, and then where did it see support lines and all of that good stuff, because cards and booster boxes tend to have levels of increments where it reaches a new height, or an all-time high for the year, and then it goes through price corrections. It kind of reaches a new support line, a new floor, and then after a while, maybe it goes through more price corrections, or it also maybe it goes up for a period of time and then maybe reaches a new level or a new support line, and then over time you just have this staircase of consistent gains or consistent losses. And so today we're going to be looking at the cards from the set Breakthrough. And so let's go ahead and jump right on into it, you guys. My name is MJ Okage. Welcome to the channel. We do videos like this all the time, so go ahead and check out the channel for anything else you're interested in. So the total set value is $857.43. And so here are the top 5 chase cards in this set. You have the 2 megas, and then you have these secret rare cards that not too long ago, just a few months ago, they were still selling for $45. Now you can see that they're selling in the $75 range. And then after that, the next 5 top cards are a trainer card, the Brigette card by, I believe it's Mitsuhiro Arita, Giovanni Scheme. You have this Mega Mewtwo EX, and then you have the 2 EXs, which are really cool. Both of them are actually different cards with different attacks. And then you have some other Mega Evolutions. You have the Houndoom, the Mega Glalie, or what is it? I don't even know what this iceberg Pokemon, if you remember from Gen 3. But this Mega Houndoom, honestly, like I wanted to get this card not too long ago, and then it went up in price. So that's the set value, $857. And just as a comparison, we have Ancient Origins at around $1,200. We just did a video on that. We're next going to look at the prices on TCG Player for each card, and then we're going to look at the prices for the PSA 10s. And what's really great about PokeData.io is that you have all the gem rates right here, and you even have all the sales. And we're looking at all-time data because I have a membership through PokeData.io. And so let's go ahead and just look at the TCG Player chart for the number 1 chase card in the set. We have the Mega Mewtwo EX. I remember I got this card for about $40, and then recently when I did my first vending show, there's a couple videos on YouTube I posted about it. I was able to sell this card for around maybe $75, and really awesome card. I got a few copies left, but let's just look at the price increase right here. You can see that this card really started to take off right here in November. of last year, 2024, it was selling for $36, and you had quite a few copies. You had 6 copies sold in November 2024, and then January for $48, you had copies sold, and then in March, $62, you had 2 copies sold, and then most recently, we've had 2 copies sold for $83.75. So now the market price is $83. And so the Mewtwo EX for the year has seen 158% gains in the past year, which is absolutely crazy. Going from a $32 card to an $83 card. That's like a $60 gain right there. And then look at the PSA 10 data. This is card market, the European market. TCG player, like we said, $83. eBay prices are ranging with different moderately played copies being sold and near mint copies and, poor copies being sold. So the average is $67. The PSA 10 price right here, there's 389 in population at $943 each. And like I said, the most recent sales have been for $891 and 2 sales in the thousands as of March. But if we go back a little bit, in February, we had a lot of sales in the 500s, in the 400s. And then if we go back to October and September of 2024, we had some sales in the 4 and 500s. And then if we go back to August and June of last year, you had most of the sales in the 2 low 300s and the high 200s. So throughout May and July of 2024. And it really started to pick up in September of 2024, where we started to have sales in the 400s and 800s. So it looks like it took another leg up to the 800s, the thousands, and 900s. So that's literally in just 2 months later. So we'll see if we kind of get some price corrections. If we look at the last month, we just see that $1,000 sale, 990 and 891. So we could continue to see some more price corrections. We'll have to see if it does go down to the prices that were sold throughout March in the 4 and 500s. Only time will tell in the coming months. But currently, we've had sales in the thousands and for 891 most recently. Next, the second top chase card, which just recently beat out the other Mega Mewtwo card. It is the Mewtwo EX Secret Rare Full Art card. And you can see there's Haxorus in the background and then that other Pokemon. And what's really cool about these cards is that they're considered secret rares. So they have this gold outer edging that we haven't seen since like Black and White. Although those Black and White secret rare cards, they're expensive. They're only half art cards. And so let's go ahead and look at the percentage gain. In the last year, this card has gained 66.7% in gains. We could see that this card was selling for around $40 throughout last year in July of 2024. And then in September, we have sales for $44. January, $54 and $60. February and March, we have sales in the 60s and 70s this year. And then April, we have those sales in the high 70s and even the low 80s as of April 28th. So it started really jumping off in January from $60 now to $81. So 66% gain for this card right here. Now let's go ahead and check out that PSA 10 data because that's what we're here for. And look at this big spike back here. That was during the COVID Pokemon market bubble boom that happened just a few years ago, if you guys remember. And this was around the time that I got back into the hobby and I was paying for PSA 10 slabs like the Lost Origin Rainbow Lugia, the Lost Thunder Rainbow Lugia. Before that, this card was only selling in the 80s and in the 40s. And then once 2020 came in 2021, we had that big sale for $1,000 in 2021. And then as soon after that, in August of 2021, so from February to August, which is only about 3 to 4 months, we see that it significantly dropped into the 400s. So all throughout 2022, it was selling in the 300s and high 200s. And then not until 2023 did we have a significant amount of sales in the 500s. And then in 2024, we had sales on April 26th in the mid 500s. June 18th, 2024, 650. And then in 2025, early 2025, it dropped from that last sale of 650 to 2025. We started to have sales In the 600s, we had price corrections in November of 2024 down to the 400s. And then January back up to the 600s. February, we have sales for $799 right here. And then the last recent sale was on March 6th, 2025. And it was not an auction. It was a straight up buy at $999. So if we look at these other ones, yeah, these last ones haven't even been auctions either. People just posted them and they sold. So yeah, we have a big jump from February at $700 and January $649. And then recently, right here, $999 in March. And you know, it has a low population of 203 copies. And then the Gem 9s, PSA 9s, 594 population. So really low gem rate. And so not too many PSA 10s. So those collectors out there are definitely collecting these mega Pokemon. And soon, later this year, we are getting new Pokemon sets that feature mega Pokemon. We look like we're going to get Inferno X for the Japanese mega set. So we possibly and most likely are getting a new Charizard mega card. All right, next, this used to be the second most expensive card out of the set. It is now the third, and not too far behind the last card. The market price for this card is $80.75, and we have a gain right here, percentage gain in the last year at 199%, 0.96. So basically a 200% gain in the last year. A year ago, this card was selling in the mid to high 20s. And then not until December did it get into where their sales in the 30s. You can see right here, December, $33. And then in January, $34, $37, $41 in January. And then in February, we started having sales for $55. And then in March, $66. We have 4 copies sale for $66. And then in April, we started having sales in the high 70s. 2 copies sold for $77. And then right here, the last sale looks like actually to be April 27th and for $80. So 4 copies sold for $80. And again, these copies are hard to find. You could see that someone even bought right here, April 26th, $119. And there's a picture provided. April 25th, $70. Another one on April 25th, $75. And before that, April 24th, $91. And so most likely this card, we're going to check it out right here. It was probably in really good condition right here. And someone was willing to pay the price for that good condition card. The centering looks nice. You know, it's definitely nice when, you know, sellers are selling Pokemon cards and they provide pictures, because you just have an extra confidence on top of it because you're able to look at it. And sometimes it still has a little bit of edge wear, but it's still considered near mint. Now let's look at the PSA 10 data, and this one absolutely took off into the high 1500s. You can see right here, population only 372 PSA 10s, so pretty low. PSA 9s, we have 515, so they're selling for around $101. And if we look at the last recent sales, we have April 1st, right here, $1,600, and then April 12th, $1,500. So it dropped by $100 in the last 2 recent sales. Before that, on March 16th, we had a sale for $1,200, and then February 27th, we had a sale for $999. February 14th, Valentine's Day, $749. Someone looks like someone bought a card that day. Maybe the right choice, maybe the wrong choice, right? January 22nd, $700. And if we go back here into 2024, late last year, it was selling in the high 400s and low 300s. And then now, February, it shot up to the 700s. And then March into the thousands. And then April into the mid to high 1500s. So pretty wild for this card. But again, you know, if collectors are out there, they want to have a particular card, they're going to have to pay the price for it. Next, one of my favorite cards out of the set, we have the Mega Houndoom right here. I actually have this card that I got in Japanese. quite a long time ago, back in 2021, and I did pay maybe around like $220 for it. And it's not as valuable as the English copy, but what I like about the Japanese copy is that the attack is in English. So the Inferno Fang right here is in English, the rest is in Japanese, and it's a really cool looking card. I might need to keep it. I was trying to sell it the last time I was vending. Next, look at the gains on this card, 434%. If you clicked on this video, now you know just how big of a gain this card has had. We could see that in July it was selling for $18 in 2024, and then in December it was only $17, and then in February 2025 we have sales for $26, and then we have quite a few sales in the 40s and high 40s throughout March. And then we had some sales for $68 at the end of March. And now in April, we have sales in the high 60s. So now the market price is $73. If we look at the last sales, you know, this is why the market price is going up. We have $94 April 28th, $84 April 28th, and $85 April 26th. So that's why the market price is quickly rising up, and that's why this card has a 434% gain. I'm going to have to add that into the thumbnail, you guys, because that is absolutely insane. Okay, next, the PSA 10 price, $500 for this PSA 10. We have 187 copies in a PSA 10, and look at the price growth on this. Back in August, this card was selling in around the 300s in 2024. And then in February, it was selling for $299 of this year in 2025. So it actually dropped from the 300s down to the low or high 200s, only by $33 drop, as you can see. But then look at this, guys. February 2nd, $300. February 10th, $399. So a $100 gain. March 4th, 2025, $430. March 8th, $500, and March 4th we have a sale for $571. So huge gains for the Mega Houndoom. Next we have the other secret rare. I actually prefer this Mewtwo EX secret rare over the other one that we just saw not too long ago. This card is up 53% in the last year. We could see that in August and September of last year, it was selling in the high 40s and low 50s. And then in January, we have sales in the high 50s. And then March, $64. And then lately in April, we have copies selling for $68. If we look at the last sales right here again, April 20th, we have a Mewtwo Secret Rare, excellent condition that sold for $149. We have 2 copies that sold on April 16th for $68. And so, yeah, there's a premium, like I said, you guys, for those excellent copies. We're going to look at this one just because, and look at that clean copy. You are not going to find copies like that on eBay. And wow, that is a beautiful copy. There's just a little bit of edge wear right here. So most likely if it was graded, they would have to get really lucky to get that 10 because there's that little bit of edge wear. And I hope that you're able to see it. Now let's check out the PSA 10 data for this card. PSA 10's, the market price is $981. There's a total population of the PSA 10 copies at 225. So there's 225 copies. Look at this jump right here. In November of last year, you can see that it was selling in the 400s and the 500s by late December 2024. And then in February and January, we have sales for 660, 760, 699. And then in April 1st, 878. And then the last 2 sales are in the $1,000 price point range right there. They're pretty close together. So $1,070 and $1,099. And you can see right there, it was buy it nows. They were not auctions. The last auction was, it looks like January 16th, 13 bidders and someone won at $660. So the prices on these PSA 10s are steadily going up. I wonder when those mega sets come out, are we going to see a crazy mega evolution boom? We've already seen it this past year. Are we going to see like price corrections, or are we just going to see another boom for mega evolutions? We're going to have to see in the next 6 months when those sets come out. Next, we have the trainer card Brigette, 15% gain. was selling last year in July for $28, dropped down to $22 in November, in January $27, and then we have copies selling in March for $32 and April for $32. And if we look at the last recent sales, we have copies selling around $33 and $35. So trainer cards, aren't too popular, but if we look at the PSA 10 data, there's only 222 PSA 10s. So the market price for the copy in a PSA 10 is $287. And if we go back here, this is back in 2021 during the Pokemon, COVID bubble boom that happened back then when everyone was getting nostalgic about Pokemon. So we have some copies that sold in the 500s, price corrected down into the 300s, went back up into the 600s and 500s, and ever since 2023, this was kind of during the trainer boom back then in 2023. Japanese trainers were popular for a while, and then ever since then we have price corrections down into the 300s, low 300s, the low 200s throughout July 2024, and then in December we have copies selling for 250, and then now in February 270. Couple copies sold in February for 370 and 350, and the last sale we have April 20th, $287. And it is a low population card, so it's more niche, right? It's a trainer card, and it's definitely a mid-era trainer card, so there's not too many people trying to buy it, so it's a little less liquid, right? We just have two more copies, I believe, that we're going to be checking out. We have the Mewtwo EX right here. There's two of them, a red one and a blue one, and they both have different attacks. We can see this card has gained 61% in the last year. Last year in September and November, it was selling in the 20s. This year in February, it was still selling in the 20s. And then we had a few copies sell for $28 in March and April. And then again, $29, a few copies sold in April. So the market price now is $30. And then if we look at the last few sales data, $39 on April 27th and $39 on April 24th. So about a $40 card actually. And now let's go ahead and look at the PSA 10 data because it's actually crazy for this card. We can see PSA 10s are selling for $540. Population 295, so low population. Last few sales, April $540. April 1st, $649, crazy. And then in March, we have sales in the high 400s. And then back in February and March, the mid to low 300s. And then in January, the low 200s. So this card has jumped in January from $225. Now sales for $650 and $540. So about a $230 jump just in the past 3 to 4 months for this card. So that is pretty crazy. A lot of people, get really nostalgic for Mewtwo cards, right? And it's a low population for those PSA 10s. And so they're more valuable, right? Because this set is almost 10 years old come, October 2025? Because this set was released in October of 2015. And look at this card right here. This is the other full art card. And I believe they have different attacks, right? Yeah, Shatter Shot, and then this one's Photon Wave. And so this card has jumped. Percentage gain, 54% gains in the last year. We could see copies in September of last year were selling for $20. And in January, they were still selling for $20. Not until March were they selling for $23, and then April, $26. So the market price is $27. Look at the last few copies though. One of them sold for $26, $40, and then a copy sold for $25 on April 16th. And even before then, we had one copy sell for $59 on April 10th, 2025. So it really depends on, again, you got to look at the listings and see, okay, one copy's at $28, but then you have several other copies in the 50s, 40s, and 30s. So once these cheaper cards, and sellers get bought up, then the market price kind of jumps from what's available. But again, more sellers can come onto the market and put their cards. And so that's one way to kind of control our market, right? You just don't post your cards until you see the price go up or you see that there's less listings. Next, this is the last data. We're going to look at the PSA 10 data. We have 199 copies in a PSA 10. Market price is currently $417. If we look at the last few sales in March, we have some sales in the 400s on March 3rd, 454 on March 12th, and then in February it was selling in the 300s, 349, 309, 335. And so this card has jumped from selling in the mid 300s and low 300s right here to then the mid 400s. So about $100 jump from January and February now into March. And so again, you guys, these are all of the cards from the set Breakthrough. Some really awesome looking cards. They've seen some really big jumps in the last year. So it's up to you guys if you want to add any of these cards into your collection. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.